Yeah, I grew up and I always loved to travel. My parents would, take us on different road trips around the United States.
Mhm.
We would go on like kind of family vacations, like cruises. So we got to see different like islands in the Caribbean. And just every place that I went, it just really opened my eyes, and I just enjoyed it so much that I knew that I wanted to be able to travel. And so learning, about the opportunity to study abroad from other people around, I was like, oh, that's definitely something I want to try to do. I didn't know if it would be possible, but we had a really good study abroad education of international education office or something like that at Missouri State, and so they really helped me and guided me through that process. Yeah, definitely. So, interesting story there. I really love Greece and I like Greek mythology.
Mhm.
So I was like, oh, I want to go study abroad in Greece. But we didn't have a reciprocal program there. So I was like, how can I get closest to Greece? And so there was an American university in Bulgaria that I was interested in going to. And at that time, it was like 2000, late 2015, 2016, there was a really huge migrant crisis
Mhm.
happening. So a lot of migrants from Africa were coming into Europe, and there was a lot of tension and, honestly, a lot of attacks that were happening on these migrants. And so when I applied, I received a letter from the State Department saying that like I wouldn't be safe to go there as a Black woman. And they don't advise it. So that was like super disappointing, honestly. I just felt like pretty defeated, like, man, like I want to do something that maybe like no one in my family has done, and I can't go to the place that I want. But I didn't let it like defeat me. I was like, I think wherever I go, I'm gonna make the most of it. So I hard pivoted and ended up going to Milan, Italy. And truly, I believe that's where I was supposed to go. It was just an incredible experience. Italy is still one of my favorite countries. The people that I like met there are still some of my closest friends, and even the coursework, I feel like I still like take some of those learnings into my job now. So it ended up being great, but it was something that, it did impact my decisions and where I ended up being able to go. Yeah, I think at that time as well, it was, quite a while now, but there were a lot of like terrorist attacks happening in Europe at that time. So I was one, afraid for my safety. Luckily, like that hasn't really happened as much recently, but at that time it really was something I was concerned about. And then I was just afraid of kind of, you know, pickpocketing, things like that I've just heard happen in Europe. I'm like, am I going to be safe? I don't know how to use public transportation. So I grew up in Kansas City, didn't have to like really do that. I was a driver. So I had a lot of fears going into it, but I was just like, I can do it. Like I'll just learn, I'll be fine. And I'll just be very aware of my surroundings. I think that was all that it really took to gain my footing. Yeah, at that time as well, it was like the whole travel influencer thing was kind of starting to happen on Instagram, which I feel like is like aging me, even though I'm not even that old. But like now, travel is so big on Instagram. I think Instagram's like 90% travel. But at
Mhm.
that point, especially Black women travelers, we weren't as a prevalent of a voice as we are now. So I followed tons of like Black travel influencers. One of them, her name was Jessica Mbongo, and she ended up to go on being the first Black woman to travel to every country in the world. So and then I ended up working for her afterwards. But I think like finding people that looked like me, that were already like traveling like I wanted to, that really helped me to kind of see what they're doing, learn from them, get advice from like the ways that they're safe and those kinds of things. Yeah, definitely. I think one thing that made it such a transformative experience for me was like seeing my Blackness through the lens of a different country and not just the United States.
Mhm.
Because they had such a curiosity about Black American culture, which I was like, oh, I started to think about like my own culture, and I'm like, wow, like I have so much pride to share this with you. Like never thought that it would be something that so many people around the world would be so interested in. So I really started to appreciate my own culture and be really excited to share it with other people. I think, being American, even if I am a Black American, having the American accent does make you treat, or does make people treat you differently when you're abroad. It does give you a somewhat of a privilege. Whereas if I maybe didn't have that, then maybe I wouldn't be treated as well. But I really didn't have that many issues in Italy. It was a pretty safe environment, and I think people were super welcoming. Yeah, I think, of course, there were microaggressions, especially with my family. My parents came and visited, and I think I saw it more with like my dad and how they treat like Black men.
Mhm.
Just like little things like, okay, if me and my dad are walking in the street, then I would see like a woman grab her bag, like, and hold it close to her. That can happen in the US, happens in the
Mhm.
US. So it wasn't like shocking. It's just like, wow, it still happens over here too. But kind of the way that I've coped with it or dealt with it is kind of like, that's not really, it's not about me, it's about them and whatever their perception is of the world, and not trying to personalize it so much. Just kind of like letting it go, until it becomes like a major issue where I'm, fearful for my safety. I really don't try to internalize any of it. And then I think as I've grown older and had more experiences with new countries, with different types of things that people might say, um, I think education is a big thing. So, instead of just like kind of saying, "Oh no, it's not a big deal," maybe just using it as a teachable moment of like, "Oh, like what do you mean by that?" Or like smiling so that they're like, "I see that you did that, but like you don't have to do that." I think just like operating with compassion and, allowing people to grow, and just giving them that space to like maybe encounter something in a different type of learning situation. I think that's kind of how I've tried to operate moving forward. Yeah, I think so. I think like the whole public transportation culture was really different for me. For one, I had never really used it. Like I had visited New York like one time and got lost on the train, so I was like not doing that. But I do think it gives, like, having a walkable city is just, it's so empowering to the people. I think it changes the culture of people. Like I felt so much more connected to the city, to the people, to events than I did maybe when I was living in the Midwest. And it's kind of has led to me, like, I live in New York now. I've lived in San Francisco. I like walkable cities with public transportation. I think it just gives me a healthier, lifestyle than maybe having really disconnected and spread apart cities. I think that was the biggest shock of like, wow, that's amazing.
Broad.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think when I first got there, I was like, I have 4 months of this. Like, wow, I have a long way ahead of me. And just so many things to learn. It was a bit overwhelming at first because I was just like, everything is brand new. I don't even speak this language. Like, this is gonna be interesting. And then, we start to like, meet new friends and really like understand how to get around and travel more in other countries. And like every single experience you're like, wow, and you start to like know like this is gonna end and you're like, I don't want it to ever end. So yeah, my last day I was just crying, I was a mess. Like I was just so sad that the experience was like coming to an end. So much so that I like studied abroad again. I did my master's degree and my MBA in Paris after I graduated from Missouri State. So I didn't want the whole like international experience to end after that. It led me to want even more because I just knew how valuable of an experience it was and how transformative it was for me.
Mhm.
Not to study, but I did visit last, Christmas. I went back. It was like my 5 year kind of reunion going back to, Milan, and now it feels small, right? Like now that I live in New York and I've traveled a lot more, I was like, wow, like I really like was just so fresh eyed when I went there. And just to see like, and just to reflect on how much growth I've had since then, I was like very proud of the courage it took to go, when I was in college. Yeah, I went by myself, so I didn't know any other students when I went. And then I know I traveled like to little parts of the Caribbean with my family, but never like across the ocean. So yeah, it was, and my parents had never done it. Like people, my like brothers had never done it. So it was a really big leap to say like, okay, I'm going. My parents were like, "Are you sure?" I was like, "Yes, I'm going to do it." So yeah, it was a very new experience for sure. Yeah, I always knew that like in my career I wanted to work globally. I wanted to, be able to travel with work, or at least in my own life be able to see other places and just meet new people. So I knew that like going to a study abroad program would give me the skills to understand cross-cultural communication and how, other markets operate, the differences and the nuances. I studied marketing, so like the differences and nuances in marketing in different markets. So I think it was super helpful in that way that like, yeah, I did learn a lot. And a lot like we use the United States so much as a reference point when we're really our own like island, right? Like there's so many other places that operate so differently. And I do think it's translated well into my career as well. I was part of the, I don't know what it's called now, but it was the Multicultural Scholars Program, like scholarship at Missouri State. I don't know what it's called now, so sorry. So that allowed me to like pay the same tuition that I would have if I was at Missouri State. Like all of that room and board, all of that stuff was kind of within that scholarship, which was great. Other than that, yeah, I didn't see that many options for financial aid, but that kind of led me to create Joy Worldwide because I didn't see it, right? And it would have been really nice to, have a little bit of additional support in that. Yeah, I mean, I just saw the world differently, I think, and yeah, you just kind of look around and you're like, okay, the world is much bigger than Springfield, Missouri. Even though I had a great educational experience there, my eyes were set higher, right? I was like, I could live here, I could live there, I could work in so many different kinds of industries. I just think my what I believed for myself that I could accomplish, it just increased because of that experience and all of the people that I met, like all of the things that I learned. Definitely. I mean, without that, I don't know if I would have really understood how to live in a city and like what it's like a big city. Even like right after I studied abroad, I went and I was a summer camp counselor in LA for the summer. And like even just being in LA, I was like, okay, I kind of understand it more because I was just in Milan and I know how to be street smart and how to get around and, those types of things. So it definitely gave me a lot more like confidence and emboldened me to be able to navigate like traveling and being able to kind of take care of myself, right? Because it's not like anyone's holding my hand when I'm going to all these cities that I'm moving around. Yeah, definitely. So I work in the travel industry now, so that kind of is like hand in hand correlation. But I think it also helped because it just elevates how creative you can be, if that makes sense. So instead of just thinking of like what I've seen in when I went to school in Missouri, right? Like I have so many more perspectives of how to view certain things. Like my roommate was from Peru, and like seeing her perspective of American movies. Like we totally thought about things differently. So bringing that into marketing, I was able just to have a much larger pull from my mind of like the different ways that we can target, the different ways that we can write things, the different ways that we can kind of express our product. So I think it just gives you altogether more context and more creativity. Yeah, now it's just so different, right? Like it's very saturated, a lot more saturated than it was back then. So I would say it's good for education, right? It's good for like, I never knew that study abroad was a thing, and I saw someone that posted that they studied abroad, and then maybe looking into it because of that. But I think it's important just to be aware that you don't want to get so trapped in seeing someone else's experience that you're not like focused on your own experience, and how not comparing how their experience looks versus how yours looks. Just making sure that like you use it sparingly so that you're able to really like just live your own experience, and like not really think about what other people are doing. Because I think a lot of people might, be like, oh, they went this place and I didn't go this place, but you got to go to this other place. So just, making sure that you stay focused on yourself. Yeah, I would say, like the Nike slogan, just do it. um, but I think like there are, it's like you kind of think like, oh, in Missouri there's not that many of us that are doing it, but when you go, you do make a community there of other women of color. Like I met so many other Black women while I was abroad from all over the United States that were similar mindsets, and we really like had a community there, and we really leaned on each other. So don't be afraid that, oh, I'm going to this predominantly blank country, I'm not going to have community. You, like, most likely you will, because there's other people that are similar to you, maybe at different schools in the US, that are also going. And then I would just say like be open to not knowing, because I think like especially for Black women, I think we're always like very like we have to know what's going on. We have to be very like on top of our business, like, and when you're studying abroad, you're not going to know a lot, and you just have to be okay with being in your comfort zone. And that's the point, right? Is to stretch yourself. So just be okay with not being in control. Yeah, I definitely did. And that was really part of the transformation of seeing myself outside of the context of the United States. I think I personally just took more pride in who I was after I came back than when I left. I didn't like, I mean, I knew I was a Black woman, but I was just like, oh, it is what it is. It's not a huge part of my identity. But when I came back, I was like, yeah, this is a huge part of my identity. It is important to how I navigate the world. It is something that I'm proud of and I want to share. And it is something that I'm not going to downplay in spaces. So, like, I'm not afraid to tell our jokes or talk about our food, or, lots of like cultural things. I'm not afraid to like downplay that in spaces anymore, because I know that there is value in it and that people are interested in it. And it's something that adds to the conversation. Yeah, I definitely think so. Like some of my friends, like we would just classify them in the United States as like, you're white. Like there's no like other culture within that. Like we just see by color. And there, I was like, oh, I have all these friends, but one is Greek, one is Ukrainian, one is like all of these different things. And they are so proud of their cultures, right? And I was like, oh, like, why don't we bring that same energy? But I think even just moving to New York, I've seen that a bit more, because there's just so many immigrants in New York. But I think like in the Midwest, I didn't see those differences in cultures and that pride and that willingness to share, and to really like bring their culture, to the world. Yeah, it was, I think like studying abroad in Milan, I think maybe it was one of the most pivotal moments in my life, where if I didn't go, I think my life would be on a different trajectory. I think it taught me like courage. It taught me, how to lose, like let go of control, but knowing that when I do that, I'm like welcoming in so much growth. And being able to step into any space and feel at home with myself, and like confident that I will be okay. And like that has taken me, to San Francisco, to New York, to different jobs, to starting a business like that. Those core tenets are something that are so important and so critical for people to learn. And so, yeah, when I was creating the scholarship, I was like, for me as a Black woman, that was so important. And I think that other, Black American students need that same transformative experience. And really a huge, like, deterrent is the cost, right? Like, there's so many other costs associated with college that studying abroad seems like, why would I ever think I can do that? And so, yeah, I was like, I'll start small and we'll figure out how it goes. But we've been received so well. So we've interviewed so many amazing students, and just hearing from them and why they want to go and what they're coming against to like be able to go. It's just inspiring me even more to just keep pushing, to keep building, and to keep bringing these to more and more students. If you have like big goals for your life, you have to have big experiences that shape your character. And I think study abroad in college is one of the best ways to shape your character, right? Like, you're doing something that is outside of your norm, which is so hard to break out of a norm for one. That you are having to do it kind of either alone or maybe with a couple people, but it takes you out of the regular life that you've been in, and it pushes you to explore, to have adventure, to find yourself, honestly. So I think, if you are someone that has big goals for yourself, I think it's a perfect opportunity that's very well designed, very structured. You get a lot of assistance from your study abroad office, you get support when you're there. It's a good way to have an opportunity to grow and expand yourself. Yeah, if you know anyone or whoever might listen to this is interested in the program, my website is joyworldwideinc.com. And we're like accepting applications on a rolling basis for the scholarship, but at the same time, we're looking for partners as well. So people that can partner with us at corporations, at educational institutions, individual donors that really want to support people in this program, and our education, our advocacy programs, our scholarship programs. There's so much work that can be done. So I'm really excited to see where it goes, and really appreciate your time as well.